Hi, I'm Dave Concepción, philosophy professor and faculty developer. During the 2011-2012 academic year, 11 diversity associates at Ball State University developed inclusive pedagogies, many of which included explicit focus on diversity-themed content. In these videos, we hear from each of them as they describe their innovation and reflect on the strengths and weaknesses of their initial implementations. Beyond showing what each participant did, these videos allow us to see the thinking of great pedagogues. The special value of these videos is that they allow us to reflect upon why some learning objectives are more valuable than others, and why some pedagogies are better than others in supporting student achievement. The goal is not merely to offer a pedagogical fish, if you will, but to show how some great teachers have fished and reflected upon their fishing. I've learned a great deal about inclusive pedagogy and diversity by working with these talented faculty. I hope you learn from them as well.
I teach English 104, which is the required English course that all students need in order to graduate from Ball State. My dissertation is about dialect discrimination and ways to address it and raise awareness of it in the classroom. Dialect discrimination has become a proxy for discriminating against groups, against whom we can't directly discriminate. The first thing that we want to do is raise their awareness of dialect discrimination and to acknowledge that it does exist. And then the next step, but once they acknowledge that it exists and they're kind of aware of it, is to realize that it's not okay. I am absolutely concerned with promoting empathy in the classroom. And one of the ways that I do this is through theater exercises and skits. Melinda McBee-Orszilak found that students engage with the material and are able to develop empathy through theater arts. And this is also something that Augusto Boal found with his Theater of the Oppressed. So when students act out the part of an oppressed person, they embody that person and are able to empathize. For this exercise, my students are going to get into groups and they're going to pick a different dialect. And the student groups are going to research this dialect and then create a skit about a person who speaks that dialect at home and experiences discrimination based on the way that they speak.
Your goals, I think, were threefold. You wanted first to improve their awareness of dialect discrimination, make some move towards them realizing that it's not okay, and have them empathize with folks who have been on the receiving end of dialect discrimination.
Like so many pedagogical objectives, these are intertwined and not really separable. So as students learn about dialects, as they learn that the variation is rule-governed and logical and predictable, then they learn, okay, these people aren't trying and failing to speak the standard, they're following different rules. So the linguistic knowledge is going to lead to tolerance.
All right, so part of the discrimination is that people hearing a certain accent make assumptions about people, such as where they come from or characteristics about them, like as if they're stupid or aggressive or something like that. And I think we can see this in the Youper skit.
Okay.
Oh, hi there, A. Welcome to Mackey's Bait and Tackle. Mackie won't be in for about a week or so because he got an ulcer going on a moose hunting trip. Lucky for the moose, eh? But anyway, I could be here to assist you.
Well, we would like to ask you a few questions.
A few questions? Ooh, about what?
Where are you from anyway?
Oh, I'm from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the Yoopers.
Are you kind of Canadian?
Kind of, well, I suppose we share similar ancestral accents over from Northern Europe and stuff, but no, I'm not kind of Canadian, I'm American, just like you.
So what did you see in that?
Well, I saw that the students have seen Youper speakers in the media as being stereotyped as outdoorsy and happy, but dumb. So these students brought those stereotypes which they've seen, and then they embodied them and further perpetuated them by presenting the Youper dialect as spoken by a person who runs a bait and tackle shop, who shops at Goodwill, who is too polite to tell someone to stop if they're calling them stupid to their face.
So one of the things that I found interesting about each of these skits was that your assignment was come up with a skit that embodies discrimination towards a person with this accent and use some of the dialectical features. And what that allowed students to do is present their own understanding of what the stereotypes are regarding this accent and people who use it. And so we can learn from it not only how properly to react from it, but what our students actually think.
One thing that I'm going to do when I use this lesson plan in the future is that I'm going to focus more on the stereotypes that students are presenting. I wish that I had focused in the class discussion more on bringing the students awareness of the stereotypes which they already have. So these students weren't aware that they were perpetuating a stereotype. And I know that if you ask them, they would say, I didn't want to do that. They nominally want to be inclusive. They don't want to discriminate against people. But in the interest of humor, they used those stereotypes as a shortcut to characterization.
Maybe it was just because all the videos I saw portraying Yoopers were they were all very happy and excited and enthusiastic about everything. But while saying the accent, I was all like, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good today.
But Catherine was using the stereotype of Yooper speakers as always good-natured and happy, so she was smiling in order to embody that stereotype. That's why she felt good.
One of the important points here is, though, that you chose the skit route as a more effective way to increase students' empathy regarding differences we find in dialects.
It worked, but not in the way I would have hoped. I wish that Catherine had felt belittled faced with the dialect discrimination rather than feeling good about it. I'm afraid that because I didn't address it in the classroom, all that she got out of it was, when I speak the Yooper dialect, it puts me in a good mood. And that's why they're always in a good mood. So when people who speak Black English, people who are bidialectical in Black English and Standard English, if they were to go home and with other Black English speakers in a home environment and speak Standard English, that would not be appropriate. That is the wrong context for that. Just as when I go home for Thanksgiving, I'm not speaking the way I'm speaking to you right now. So in this skit, they're showing what happens when you have these two different contexts juxtaposed.
Hi, I was wondering, do you have this tie in any other colors maybe?
I believe we have it in purple, blue, and white.
Okay.
I can check in the back for you if you'd like me to.
Okay, that's fine.
Actually, it's my break though, so you're not going to ask another person.
Okay. I know.
Hey, Tiffany. I noticed that you were doing a really good job today.
Oh, yeah.
But I just wanted to know, I know you're going on break soon, but I was wondering if you had maybe finished the mannequins yet?
Oh, yeah, they're done.
Okay,
They're
just
done.
making
They're
sure.
done.
We got to get the fall line out.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
Oh, God. Jesus. Hello? Girl, we up in this store. I promise they get on my nerves. Really? A party? Who gonna be there? Oh, we finna get down, girl. Shoot. No, they just getting on my nerves though. Like, I just don't understand. Like, really? Okay. Anyways, no. Shoot. This is what I think. You know what? Oh, I will call you right back, okay? All right. Hi.
So I know you're on break,
Yeah.
but we're still in the store, and I know you were talking a little bit different. I think that you should keep it a little more professional, I guess. I know that's how you talk in your hood, but I think that we just have a classy environment, so we want to keep it classy.
Okay, I will try better or harder. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm glad we had this talk.
All right. We're done. I quit.
So on the one hand, these are merely different dialects, and we could say of them that one dialect is appropriate in one setting and another dialect is appropriate in another. On the other hand, one setting is taken to be the more professional or prestigious, valued setting. So we have a conflict between accepting difference and just trying to fit into the dominant linguistic pattern. I think we have some comments from students about that.
So what was discriminatory about what Alexandra did?
She said that might be how you talk in your hood. That was one thing.
She said it wasn't classy.
Keep it professional.
Yeah. Yeah, good. So before you guys took this class, did you conceive of Black English as being unprofessional and slang?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you noticed subject-verb agreement. Would you say that that's unprofessional?
As far, like, my whole education has pretty much taught me that it has been, and all my teachers, if I put that on a paper, then it is considered, like, incorrect. But this makes me think that nothing's really right or wrong. It's just, like, a matter of who's being the judge of it.
This also reinforced the fact that there's no one specific way, correct way to speak or.
Since I did do African American and I am an African American, I kind of felt like I was just doing what I would normally do. Because if I was to work in a store as Gucci or something, I probably wouldn't speak the way I usually speak. So I would basically be forced to be by the dialectal because, so I wouldn't have to face like discrimination or stereotypes. So.
Well, you're in college. Aren't you bi-dialectal now?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So do you feel that's discriminatory that you have to switch?
Well, it's not necessarily discriminatory. I think it depends, like I said before, like how the person might approach me or what they, how they feel towards the way I speak.
So what we've got there are comments from two different students saying that these are just different ways of speaking and we need to appreciate difference. And then the final comment is a student saying, well, sometimes it's not just about difference. Sometimes it's actually discriminatory, other times it's just different. What do you make of those comments? What does that tell you about what your students have learned?
Well, obviously that student, Sanovia, was bi-dialectal before she took this class, but now she's able to realize what's going on with her speech. So she is gaining a level not necessarily of empathy, since she said that's just what I would normally do, but kind of self-awareness of how she changes her language in certain situations.
So the Gucci skit is not merely dialect discrimination, it's also straightforward racism because the particular dialect is associated with a particular race.
Yeah, calling a dialect unprofessional is dialect discrimination. People certainly aren't going to tell someone who is from England that they need to start speaking American, but you will hear people say that to people who speak Latino English.
In forms of intellectual and ethical development, William Perry discusses a four-staged theory of cognitive development for college-age students, moving from dualism through multiplicity, relativism, finally to commitment. I think the first two students that we saw there are clearly in the multiplicity stage. They've moved away from there being one correct way of speaking and all other ways are incorrect. They now recognize there are multiple ways that could be correct. And yet they're not quite thinking that one way is more valuable in at least certain contexts than another one might be in a certain context. Where I think the third student is beginning to feel that tension. At the commitment level, you can say it's inappropriate to not use Black English in certain home cultures. So it's not just that all ways of speaking are okay. That's more the multiplicity relativism area. But getting to say, in our home area, not only is this one among the acceptable ways to speak, if you don't speak this way in this home culture, you're not properly valuing our difference.
Yeah, and I know that in the 16 weeks I have my students, I can't bring them through all four stages of development. But I feel that I'm successful in bringing them from duplicity to multiplicity. So they begin to understand it's not just as simple as good English and everything else is bad English. Go ahead, Rex.
I think what I learned, honestly, is like I'm a pretty intemperate person. If someone's disrespecting me, it's just how I just react real quick. I think someone that was in a community would have a dialect and they're constantly hearing this every day. You have to be very easygoing, very laid back to really get through the day. If you were easy and tempered, I think you would just snap all the time. I mean, you'd probably learn to just, more easygoing, like, hey, talk things out, so to say, I guess.
Yeah.
You'd have to learn to deal with it. You'd have to learn to calm yourself.
Rex was only acting like a person who speaks Latino English for just a few minutes, less than 5. And he had already grown fatigued of it. So a lot of times we see people reacting to discrimination with anger. And sometimes we're ready to blame that anger and say, okay, anger is not an appropriate emotion and you should not express it. And he's saying that it would be understandable in this circumstance. And he gained respect for people who put up with this every single day.
In another case, one of your students showed an increased ability to take another perspective where he was feeling excluded initially, even though he's part of the dominant culture, and he didn't understand why people who are receiving the discrimination would exclude him.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm a little tired from all the studying.
Oh my god, I know. I am so exhausted.
Yeah, I only have 2 more chapters left. I'm sorry for asking though, but are you gay?
Yeah, why you ask?
Because I think it would be best if you got some help for your condition.
My condition?
Yes. Aren't you worried about your immortal soul?
My immortal soul is fine. If God wanted me any other way, he would have made me that way. It's sad to think that you're judged for your sexuality. It's not really harming anyone, that yet you still can have so much stress over judgment over you. And I mean, I actually thought about it. Maybe they don't want to include me in with their conversation because they're afraid of being judged for what they talk about.
Okay. So that's not quite empathy, but it is a move away from the narcissism of youth.
Yeah, so every student comes to the class in a different place in their development. And maybe Sanovia is moving from multiplicity to the 3rd stage, somewhere closer to commitment. And maybe Rex is ready to move, he's ready to take that empathy step. And if this student is ready to move towards empathy, then I'm going to consider this successful. A lot of times with pedagogical objectives, we want to say students will achieve this by the end. And as far as I'm concerned, as long as they experience some change, they don't have to go all the way, but as long as they start thinking about it, I think that I've done my job.
When evaluating a pedagogy, it's valuable to think about the risks that an implementation of that pedagogy presents. One of the risks in your case is encouraging students to demonstrate discriminatory or prejudiced behaviors could potentially condone those behaviors.
Because there were 3 groups which had problematic present characterizations, I was able to show students that even though when they were writing it, they didn't set out to characterize Latinos as being drunks. And in fact, they said, I didn't mean to do that. I wasn't thinking that. But that is exactly what they did. So when those students, the afternoon class, wrote down what they had learned, many more of them said, I didn't know I had these prejudices. They hadn't even realized consciously that they were part of the problem.
Strong pedagogical thinking is always going to be iterative. So you had a good plan to get to good goals, and having implemented it once, you discovered that you were taking a risk you didn't quite know you were taking, and you discovered that in fact the students are going to give you more fodder for even deeper conversation.
What I'm going to change next time is how I address the skits. For future skits, I want the students to ask the presenters about their dialect. So I want the students to generate some of the discussion questions. Additionally, I think I want to focus on the stereotypes that students are bringing into the classroom more. I think that kind of got lost.
One thing we've seen here is what students in the Midwest think about dialect discrimination, and that groups of students in other parts of the nation would have very different reactions.
I would love to see students' comments if this were done in a university elsewhere. So perhaps people in the Southwest might gain more perspective on Latino English because they have so much experience with it on a daily basis that for them it might not be quite so liberating. Like Rex realized, okay, these people face discrimination. The students said, we didn't realize that this was even a dialect. That might not be so revelatory for people in the Southwest.
One of the things I found so interesting about your pedagogical choice of saying relatively simply to the students, create a skit that uses dialectical features and expresses and demonstrates dialectical discrimination is that it can work anywhere and that it will be different everywhere it works.
It's another benefit of having a student-centered classroom. They tell me what's going on in their lives rather than me telling them.
I hope you found this video informative. To see other videos in this series, visit Ball State University's Office of Institutional Diversity website.